All right. Thank you guys for joining. Good evening. If there's anyone on the call that's not in the Gold Coast and joining us from somewhere else, welcome. Thank you very much for joining. This is the first of a series of webinars that we're going to be running, and I'm super excited. So I really appreciate your support and for being on the call with us tonight. So here, let me tell you a little bit about what you're in for. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jenny Mutu, and I'm the founder of She Leadership, an organization that coaches women launching careers in male-dominated industries to develop leadership and life skills at the beginning of their career. So tonight's webinar, as I mentioned, is the first of a series of webinars designed for ambitious women who want to control their future by taking care of their now. So congratulations on being part of our very first. Thank you so much. So the webinars that we'll be running will be on a monthly basis, and they're covering different topics from money, psychological safety, career mapping, personal styling, dating safely online, and so much more. That is all about helping young women shape their mindset, their habits, and the practices that are going to make a difference to how they live and how they experience life. Our goal is to help young women have the tools, the resources, and the knowledge so they can lead themselves successfully in their life. And so if there's a topic that you think you are an expert in or that you'd like to learn more about, I'd love to hear from you, because I'm currently just filling the spots for the months and looking for people who can make a positive contribution in this space. So tonight, we have a fantastic presentation by Gail McHugh on why everything you see about being rich on socials will make you poor and what to do about it. We're going to explore some of the myths on social media about getting rich and start looking at some of the strategies that you can implement to develop good money habits and practices, to have a good money mindset, and to get you started in taking care of your financial well-being. I don't know how many of you are aware, but single women over 50 are the new face of poverty in Australia. And part of the impetus and the drive for having this particular session and kicking off with this session is looking at how can we as a community start to educate our young women and our young men to equip them with what they need so that this isn't their reality at some point in their life. And so they've got good practices, they've got good habits, and they've got good strategies to keep them through no matter what's happening for them in their life. So if they happen to encounter another situation like COVID, where 1 million people got made, redundant or lost their jobs overnight, they're in a position that they're okay. So they've got a strategy that they can live and survive and thrive in spite of whatever's going on for them. So tonight we're going to allow some time for Q&A. So feel free to pop your questions in the chat or even save them to the end. It's going to be fairly organic, and we only have an hour to do our best. So we're going to leave you with some valuable information that you can use right now. All right, to get us started, I want to introduce you to Gail McHugh. Gail is a dynamite with extensive experience in financial services and with a career in financial planning that she began way back in 1997. Gail making her own multi-million-dollar mistake as a 30-something-year-old woman, she realized that what you don't know can actually have dangerous implications. And as a result of that mistake, she's been learning and studying ever since. In her work as a financial professional, Gail loves helping clients achieve positive results and outcomes by empowering people to be financially empowered and improving their relationships with money and increasing their money confidence. She works with clients of all backgrounds and ages and uses everyday language that they can understand. And certainly I know Gail as someone who is deeply caring and goes above and beyond. She's the author of Women Mind Your Money, a book she wrote to provide financial literacy and skills to empower women with knowledge so they could thrive financially. Gail offers a range of financial services from asset protection and estate planning through to intergenerational wealth strategies and structures, through to money management and investing. And today, Gail joins us to debunk some of these myths and why we see things on social media about that's going to make us rich, but actually it makes us poor, and walk us through some of the strategies that we can implement right now to turn our financial situation around. So please put your hands together and give a warm welcome to Gail for joining us. Hey, hello, Gail.
Thank you for having me. Thanks, Joy, for the big clap. Yay. It's a really funny thing because, as you said before, you don't know what you don't know. And I had worked in banking for, gosh, a long time. And then I realized when my husband came home from work, and this is my $1 million mistake, okay?
Yeah.
He came home from work and he said, hey, Gail, I want to invest $100,000 into this business. And I went, oh, we only owe $14,000 on our mortgage. What do you think you're playing at? Pretty much was what my thought process. But instead I went, no. I didn't know that I should ask some extra questions. My original thought was, will you have anything to do with it? No, I don't want to know anything about it. Whereas had I asked a few more questions and understood a little bit more about the business that they were going to go into and the opportunity that was there, we could have turned that $100,000, which would have been debt originally, into more than $1.1 million 3 years later.
Right.
Because that company, which was going to take $100,000 of our money, turned out to be being sold to a very large multinational, or actually international, brake and clutch organization. So I really do know how to make $1 million mistake.
Right.
And that was 30 years ago. So can multiply that out and the implications of having made that mistake.
Yeah.
That's what caused me to start to go and learn.
Excellent. Okay, so I want to share with you, and this could be a great context for our conversation today and some of the points that we touch on, is that some feedback that we're hearing through employers who are employing young people, for instance, is that they don't have enough inbuilt curiosity. They're actually identifying curiosity as a skill that young people need these days to be leaders, right? And as we're moving more into the sort of hybrid market and the market where people are potentially working 100% remote, curiosity implies the ability to be able to ask questions beyond what's in front of you. So you're not waiting for an employer, for instance, to tell you what to do. You're actually using that skill of curiosity to investigate what do I need to do and how can I do this better? So I really love that you presented with that. And I guess we'll start off with, this is a classic myth, right? And, I'd love a show of hands or just a quick yes in the chat if you've been guilty of this, but the whole getting rich quick or getting rich overnight. I mean, social media itself is just rife with that kind of content, and everybody's selling something to be able to give the answer to that, right? So whether it's becoming an influencer, investing in crypto, whatever it is, there's this big get rich quick kind of pull happening. And I know for myself, my own daughter has, she's listened to some things and I'm like, I'm really curious about what she's listening to or what she's being attracted to. So a yes in the chat if you've ever thought or looked for an option to get rich quick. I know for certain in my younger years, MLM was the answer and I went looking for that sort of stuff. So what's the take on that, Gail?
Oh, look, when it comes to most things, it's about being curious enough to ask the right questions. The other side of the coin is to be smart enough to say no when it seems too good to be true. And I'm sure everyone has had a little dabble in an MLM. And for the reason that the people at the very top make the money because the people underneath do the work. But by the time you're introduced to it, you're probably about 30 or 40 rows down the MLM tree. So I'm always very skeptical of that because it's the early adopters that make the money. If you're a later, or like a middle of the range or a late adopter, you've got very little chance of making money unless all your upline basically die.
All right, so you talked about okay, so we talked about some questions. All right, so there is a lot out there in terms of get rich quick or different schemes and things that people have. So what are the kinds of, because if you're green and you're just exploring this space and you're getting, you know, sucked in by the dream, because of course that's what's on sale here, right? The ability to travel, the ability to buy all this stuff, the ability to work when you want and all of those things. So what are the kinds of questions that young people can start asking to start to qualify, you know, whether this is a legit investment, whether they should be spending time and energy in this space?
One of them, I've often thought, well, okay, I'm just going to be a cynical person here because that's partly my job. Do you know that all of these finfluencers and the influencers and all the people that are making out there having massive incomes, the ATO actually have a very specific unit that goes out and checks tax returns against what's happening on social media. And
Right.
basically, if people are being overstating or seem to clearly overstate their income and their lifestyle, well, the tax office are going, please explain. And there's a lot of people getting caught with having to pay tax bills that they thought they didn't ever have to pay because the tax office have actually done some investigation.
Right. So beware if you actually are successful in that space.
Be prepared to pay the tax for it, okay?
Yeah.
Some of the things to look out for are when you see people suddenly become very wealthy on social media, be very skeptical, because if you start to watch what they're doing, particularly on the Gold Coast, you see people, all right, I'm going to tell you I drive a 10-year-old car by choice because I've got a share portfolio and a whole pile of other things that are making me money. I can't see any value in driving a $100,000 car. But if you see a $100,000 car being driven by somebody who 6 months ago had no income, that's a fairly good indicator that they've got a very large lease and they're probably not going to be able to afford to pay it if things change in their circumstances. And during COVID, during GFC and any other financial crisis that goes on, you see that change because people suddenly don't have the money to pay for all the bells and whistles that they used to have. So bells and whistles, watch out for them. Flash cars, watch out for them. Overseas holidays, you can either do them on a budget or you can do them 5-star. You know, it's just down to realizing that people don't have money that they make out that they've got.
All right. So how do I qualify a deal? So I'm on socials. I've come across something that I think is just amazing. It's like all my dreams come true. What are some questions I can start to ask to delve a little bit deeper, you know, beyond the marketing and the glitz and the glam? What are some things?
Do you have any form of experience in the arena? Or if you don't, does somebody you know and trust have some experience in that same area that you're looking to go into?
Okay, so I would go and look at my network and say who else does this or who else has experience in that.
Or who else knows something about it. Or if they don't know it, who in their network would possibly be able to have a chat with you. Put the conversational filter on it, because if you can't have a conversation with somebody about legitimate questions and they brush you off, you're going to basically find that there's something too good to be true.
Right. So you want to know, like, I guess you'd want to know, like, how much money are they making? Are they really making? And whether they would answer that question or not, I suppose, and truthfully. What actual time investment? Because I guess the whole getting rich quick, you know, makes you think that there's not much effort involved on your part to be able to achieve this, right?
But hang on, what are we measuring? Success, or are we measuring internet riches? Because if we're talking about the two, they're very different things. Because for some people, they might have 10 years of hard slog to get to that one day of success or that first year of success. But they won't tell you that they've had 10 years of hard slog. They'll just say, this is what I did and this is how I make my money.
Right. So there's no real overnight success really when you think about it, because there's a whole bunch of skills and knowledge that has to get developed for you to be able to have the ability to do those things, right?
Just to even put this webinar on tonight, Jenny, think of the skills that you have pulled together over time and the marketing expertise that's required to make this happen.
Yeah.
Without all those correct steps, you're not going to be able to succeed anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So I guess to kind of make that a little bit more succinct, it's like, what industry is being promoted, and do you know somebody already in that industry that you could have a conversation with? What can you find out about that industry? What is the real effort or skills or talent or time commitment required to actually make it where those people are? Because even if you're looking, I had somebody tell me that their 17-year-old daughter wants to become an influencer, and an influencer in what? I'm not really sure, but even that in and of itself, like, you need to be able to have an ability to add some level of value to people. You need to be able to market. You need to be able to communicate well. You need, videography
Funny you should
skills.
say that, because I actually had drinks with a lady a week or so ago, and her daughter is an influencer who lives in the US.
Okay, great. Tell me about that.
So she actually has, to quote the mother, bigger than a full-time job. She has 4 phones and multiple computers, because she's always creating content, and effectively where you might, if you're in a 9-to-5 job, work 8 hours a day, ballpark, she's probably working 12 hours a day to make it look like she's got an amazing life. Yes, she does get paid quite well, because she has managed to build a decent portfolio of properties. I think she's just about to buy her 4th, and she's not even 30 yet. However, she's got a degree in marketing, and she has parents who are legal professionals who have basically supported her all the way through this journey. But she doesn't have time to actually go and have a relationship, and she doesn't have time to do anything other than create content.
Right. Yeah. So there's a trade-off for everything.
Full-time job. 100%.
Yeah. All right. Well, that leads really well into the next kind of myth that we have, is that everybody's life on socials is perfect. Have you ever seen that? So the perfectly curated photos, and the models that look amazing and just have these amazing bodies and these amazing lives, and it sort of like refuels the whole keeping up with the Joneses mentality. I think, like, moving to the Gold Coast in particular, I have never seen so many girls with fake, whether it's fake lashes, fake, boobs, fake tans, there's just so much of it, which is really kind of amazing, I think, as a small ecosystem. But I guess what's scary about some of that from my perspective is that there's an element of this keeping up with the Joneses that is attached to Maslow's need of belonging. So if I look like this, then I will belong to that. And I think what it does is it unconsciously creates this need for people to conform without them understanding why this driver is there, because they don't necessarily understand the belonging and the depth of that driver. So what do you think about that? Because, we talked about things a bit like Afterpay and the ramifications of trying to keep up with the Joneses.
Keeping up with the Joneses is the most expensive mistake most people can do. And sadly, the younger generations seem to go, and okay, I'm 60, I'm being honest here. So effectively, we've got kids who are coming out of school and needing the fake lashes, the whatever. And I have a friend who's got a 40-year-old daughter. She's got fake boobs, more Botox in her face than you could care to poke a stick at. I honestly don't know how, as a psychologist, she's actually in a good headspace to help her clients, because her self-worth is attached to her exterior image. And that's one of the biggest challenges that we have, is that the people's self-worth is attached to unrealistic expectations. And that unrealistic expectation can be anything from starting out with your first car. I remember my first car was a bomb. Didn't care. Still don't care what I drive, because I have a different priority. But in those days, it was about getting from A to B. Now it's about, well, why put $100,000 into something that's going to cost me money and depreciating value? But our kids are basically coming out of school with no idea about how to handle money, and also no idea about how their self-worth is being attached to something totally fake and manipulated. And effectively, all we're doing is seeing with Afterpay and all of those other buy now, pay later schemes that people are damaging their future credit capabilities.
So how is that? Because, I liken Afterpay a bit to the mentality of, I'm just going to have this chocolate bar and then I'm going to go to the gym later and work it off. And that's okay when you're 20 and you're 30, but at some point you become 40 and 50 and 60, you just don't have the energy level or the time or all sorts of things, right, to be able to compensate for that. So eventually that habit of thinking more than anything else catches up with you, and it's just dysfunctional, right? It doesn't work. So for me, Afterpay is a bit like that. I'll just put this on Afterpay and I'll pay it off later. And it's okay, because there are some certain assumptions that you're making. Number one, that you're going to still have the money to be able to pay it in the first place. Number two, that you're paying it on time, because as we know, there's ramifications if you don't.
Yep.
But what, if you put out a long-term kind of perspective of that habit of thinking, what do you see is the danger?
Okay, so from my perspective, the biggest danger that most people have is that they never actually start to understand the flow of their money. And if you can't understand the flow of your money, where it comes from and where it goes to, you're effectively not going to be able to know how to build a reserve in any way, shape or form. And without a reserve, you're not going to be able to get through unexpected things like a COVID epidemic where people lost their jobs. The government doesn't necessarily print $750 a week checks all the time. It's unrealistic. It's not capable of being done. So from the perspective of not understanding where your money flows, it means that you have no concept of how to manage money, because Afterpay is effectively doing, I don't have the money, but I want it, so I'm having it. It's got an instant gratification component to it.
Yeah.
I'm old enough to have done lay-bys in the old-fashioned way.
Yes.
And that was, I want it, but I can't have it till I've paid for it. It's the same as I want it, but I need to save for it. How many people do you know will save for a holiday, go like crazy, have a holiday, or some of them, worse yet, will put it on a credit card or go and get a personal loan and be paying it off for the next 5 years?
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think as far as risk and as far as just the whole mentality of consumerism and where we are now, certainly there's a lot more options for people to get into financial strife than there ever was, right? So I want to talk a little bit about that inflow and outflow of money when we come to some of the strategies. But just to cover off a couple of other things, I guess crypto is quite a topical conversation as well, as far as making money and the viability of that. And I mean, I speak to a lot of different types of investors, and some investors think crypto is the best, and some go, wouldn't invest in anything other than bricks and mortar and physical stuff because it's, quite intangible. So what's your take on that?
I've got some.
Yeah.
I have. And it's one of those things that I do believe we will end up with a digital currency. It's not necessarily that we will have just a single currency or digital coin, whatever you want to say. There will be when you've got all of the big banks globally creating their own coins, MasterCard, Visa, they're creating their own coins. So we're basically moving towards a digital currency, regardless of whether we want it or not. I do understand, and I do have clients with significant crypto portfolios. Having said that, I can't advise on crypto, but it's something that I do believe most people should investigate. Doesn't mean you have to put a lot of money into it, but you could even just pick some coins like you can with share portfolios. You can create like a mystery portfolio. You don't have to put any money into it. You can just basically see how the markets move by simply picking a coin or picking a share, recording the starting price, recording what you would have put into it, so you know how many units or coins that you would have purchased, and then track that. most people who have never had any experience of investing in any way, shape, or form just assume it's a bit like a gamble. Everything is a gamble if you don't understand it. So take the time to understand it before you start to throw your own good money at it.
Yeah. Okay.
Mind you,
and do you,
one thing I don't
yes, go ahead.
one thing I don't do is gamble on horses or anything like that, because, you know, literally I have no idea, even though my grandfather was a race horse owner and breeder.
Well, I mean, like, that's an interesting segue, I suppose, into where we're going next with starting a business. But whether, I mean, even that, I've heard people who are professional gamblers, for instance, and I put a post up in the lead up to this webinar around a gentleman who was a drug dealer, and not that we're advocating for that, but both of those, believe it or not, still require an in-depth level of study to know what you're doing to be able to be successful. So if we look at the gambling, like, depending on what you're choosing, if you're choosing horse racing, there's still a significant investment of time to understand and learn about horse racing and how to make money in that, right? So there are, I guess what the point is, that there are some legitimate, legal, and much more lucrative ways of making money than potentially going down the gambling or the drug dealing route. So, which leads nicely into starting a business. So let's talk about starting a business, because obviously there's a whole range of different businesses that we could start. There's still that perpetuation of like getting rich really quickly in your business, which is not necessarily the case. And there are a lot of people online selling the silver bullet, like, buy my program and it's the only program that you need and you'll make $1 million. So what do you think about that?
Gosh, I cannot tell you how many times I have seen things in my Facebook feed or in other social media going, oh, we're up to 90% off. And I'm like, okay, but I still don't need your product. Because I think most people just get the discount thing and their eyes go boom, and they suddenly go, oh, let me just get this massive discount because I'll never have to pay for it again, or, you know, it's a one-off fee. I personally have been caught with a one-off fee. Mind you, it was $1, so it wasn't too bad. I didn't, like, it wasn't going to cost me my house, is what I'm getting at. So if you're going to make an investment in a program like that, make it something that's effectively something you wouldn't care if you lost.
Do you think, though, it would be worthwhile, if you're going to start a business, actually identifying what are some skills or some areas where you think might be your strengths, what might be your weaknesses, and then actually getting help, free or otherwise, in the areas that are going to support you to make money in the best possible way, in the quickest possible way? Because a lot of people invest time and money in things that are not income generating necessarily for their business. So they're spending time, they're spending money, and they're spending energy in things that are not income producing.
That's very true. One thing that I did learn a long time ago is that there are things that it's far cheaper for me to actually outsource. So my website and my IT, than me trying to actually manage it myself, because I take all day to do something that it might take the website guy 15 minutes to do, because he does it on a regular basis. So to me, it's about understanding and playing to your skill set.
Yeah.
And if your skill set is such that you're an attention to detail person and you shouldn't be at the front of a room trying to sell something to somebody, maybe you should not be in business. For example, my sister, she's all about attention to detail, process, but she asked me to go into business with her at one stage. I did 90% of the work and left her with one thing to do. That was 4 years ago. We still haven't launched that business.
Right. So understanding more about yourself then, and where are your tendencies? What's your profile, generally speaking? Are you the people person at the front of the room, or are you the person that's doing the doing, or are you the person that's evaluating the doing that's been done? Like, if I can put it that way, right? So we're all, different profiles, and knowing.
Understand yourself first.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So what's going to make you successful in business based on the kind of profile that you have?
Yep. Because if you're a person who's a big picture person but has absolutely no attention to detail, you need somebody in your team that can have the attention to detail, or you need somebody to have the skill set that complements yours if you're taking on a business partner or somebody in your team.
Right.
some of those things that you need to do is basically stop and think, is there a niche or is there a market for what you do?
Yeah. So again, some skill development that needs to happen there. And I think one of the things that really comes out in this conversation is the ability to communicate, right? So whether it's communicating the things that you need, communication with yourself, the communication with other people to perhaps learn the things that you need. And one of the things I also notice with business owners is, what are you willing to do versus what you're not willing to do? Because sometimes what you're not willing to do is the very reason why you're not being successful in the first place.
100%, because being a self-employed person takes far more effort than anyone would ever consider, particularly if they're an employee. They have no concept of the deprivation of sleep that sometimes goes into putting together something. So I know I was writing my book at 3:00 in the morning one time, and my husband's come out and he's going, "What are you doing?" And I went, "Writing a book." And he went, "Now?" And I said, "It's flowing." So I'm typing like a mad thing.
Yeah.
Deprivation is part of being business owner, the same as it is of having kids, for goodness sake.
Not to mention, you really have to be a jack of all trades, unless you've got the ability to then, pay people or barter or whatever you're going to do to get help that you need, right?
Yes, true. And
all right,
when you are starting out, understand that most of what you're going to make is going to have to be reinvested into your business. You're not just going to go, "Oh, let me take all the profit," because you need the money that you make to grow your business. It's effective.
Excellent.
Creating a money-making machine takes time and takes money and takes effort.
Yeah.
It's not something that can be done like overnight.
Yeah. And there's skills that you've got to learn along the way, and there's muscles that you've got to build, right? So that kind of leads us nicely into, let's kind of talk about some of the mindsets or the habits or the practices that can help people build the muscle and stuff that they can put in place right now towards their financial well-being. What are some things that you would recommend?
I say this to my clients all the time. Firstly, let's look at where you're spending your money. And when you do identify where you're spending your money, start to look at things like your internet, your phone, your electricity provider, your health fund, all those types of things. Those fixed costs, minimize them where you can. Because
okay, so that would be the first step, right? Is to start to make a list of everything that you spend your money on. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So I just want to emphasize that a little bit, because I know that when I first started this journey, it was really tempting not to put certain things on that list. So I'll give you an example. Oh, I might have some money that I'm spending on a party, for instance. So I want to go out and I want to go drinking, but I'm not going to put the drinking money or the alcohol purchases on that list necessarily, right? Because they're ad hoc, I just put them under a miscellaneous bucket and just kind of forget about it. And then, I might get my nails done occasionally. So that kind of goes in the miscellaneous bucket. What's your recommendation there? Should I really list all of these things out line by line, or can I just lump them in like a miscellaneous bucket?
Where do you apply your miscellaneous bucket? So I actually have a budget template that I provide to people. And it's got hairdressers, it's got whether you go to the optometrist, what your gap is, it's got your body corporate fees, it's got everything. You can do the same to a business. So effectively, if you're pulling your business apart, I know one of my big costs is rent, electricity. The bill came today, and if I pay it on time, I get nearly $100 discount. So you can allow for these things, but you can also allow for the discounts that are going on. I have a software package that costs me the best. One of my 5 software packages, it cost me nearly $900 a month. So this is just for my business. And without that software package, it makes my life a lot more difficult. It effectively is, it writes my statements of advice and it does on my CRM work. But from my perspective, without that, everything that I do would probably take 4 or 5 times longer. So you have to build the cost in to offset your efficiencies gained.
Okay, so for a young person who doesn't necessarily have a business and just starting their career, we really want them to start to list out all of the things they spend their money on. And so I'm hearing
100%.
like, including things like a Spotify subscription or a Netflix or Stan or whatever they have that's monthly and ad hoc. So we want to get that list down.
So one of the best things you can do is actually download your bank statement as a CSV.
Okay. Yeah.
And then you can sort it. So it's a file that basically allows you to sort it. You can
Okay. So what if I'm, I mean, most young people, I guess, would be spending money just tapping, right? Like just tap their phone, tap their watch or whatever. What if some of my money I'm actually spending in cash and then some of it is, you know, I'm using a tap kind of system? What would you recommend then?
Well, if you're taking cash, take it for a specific purpose. For example, your nails or your hairdresser or your groceries, whatever. Because when you just continually tap, you actually have no concept. And this is a very, very deeply ingrained thing based on psychology. You don't realize what you've spent. And how many times do you buy a cup of coffee a week?
Mm.
And what's the average cost of a cup of coffee?
It's like some places up to $8, I think, because they're charging you for the cup, the type of milk, you know, the size. Yeah.
Now, I drink the long black because I'm lactose intolerant, so milk's out. And for me, I can buy a kilo of really good quality beans, and I've got a coffee machine in my office and I have one at home. And with my $30 kilo of beans, I can probably drink, for coffee for a month and a half.
Yeah.
Whereas if I go out and buy my coffee, it's $6 or $8, whatever you're spending. So those types of simple little habits are basically how you can make a difference in.
Okay. All right. So what I'm hearing is, like, once we've made that list, and we should probably keep track of everything we're spending in cash as well as on a card, if that happens to be the combo. We've made the list, then we can actually start looking at that list and starting to
100%.
see how much money am I actually spending on this a week or a month. And like you said, you know, if it's a daily habit like coffee, how much am I actually spending? And start to keep track of that. And then potentially seeing where you can start to cut some of those expenses.
When you can trim it a little bit.
Yeah.
I know one of my friends is an accountant. She refuses to pay more than $1 for a cup of coffee at the servo. So she walks to the servo every day. And I'm like, I'm not drinking that rubbish, but for her, that's her standard of coffee that she's prepared to drink. Yeah. But she's not afraid to spend really good money on holidays because that's what gives her joy.
Right. So there's this trade-off. Like, do you want, the little luxuries of the coffee versus, the holiday at the end? And I noticed Jordana put a comment in the chat about how she took 2 years to save for her holiday, while she was still at uni, which is just amazing. And you don't meet many young people today who are willing to invest that time and energy for that delayed gratification. All right. So we've got saving, we've got putting in. Oh, you've raised your hand, Jordana. Do you want to ask a question?
No, I was going to explain my holiday. Yeah, so I saved literally for 2 years, pretty much saved every single penny because it was quite an expensive holiday. It almost cost me $3,000.
Right.
It was a lot of money, and I saved for 2 years in the middle of COVID as well.
Wow.
Congratulations.
I was part-time as well, so a lot of money went to that holiday, but it was one of the best experiences ever. And
isn't that the case though? Like when you do save for something and you are working hard towards it, when you actually realize that goal, it's so much more fruitful.
How do I know?
All right. So Gail, a couple of other tips that you could run us through just before we go into the Q&A?
Okay. So I'm going to say, be grateful for everything that you have. Gratitude changes everything. I was speaking to somebody yesterday, and Saturday, I helped them on my day off negotiate their house sale and purchase. So purchase of a new house. And they had no idea of what they were doing. But what I'm going to say is, because I've had plenty of experience at buying and selling houses. I was very grateful to be able to guide them, and they've got an exceptional outcome. But anything that you do in regard to progressing your financial well-being, whether it be to reduce your costs or start to invest, or do not as I used to. I used to be pretty much the equivalent of Imelda Marcos. I had a massive shoe collection. And when I realized what I didn't know, which was that shoes don't make you money, I stopped. I converted from buying shoes to buying shares.
Right.
And it's been a really helpful thing, because those shoes that I actually went without, not that I did go without, because I still had plenty of shoes. The choice was, if I had $100 that I might have spent on a pair of shoes, but I spent $100 on buying some shares, I know that I have some shares that I paid $9 for, and they're currently worth about $35. And all the way through, they have continued to pay me income.
Great.
So let's say for my $100, I would have got 11 shares.
Yeah.
So my 11 shares that are now worth $35 are $385. And all I originally put in was 100.
Yeah.
So it's about getting your priorities right and changing your way of thinking. But being grateful for the fact that you've identified that maybe I really don't need that latest Apple Watch, or I don't need my lashes done, those types of things.
Yeah. So I guess then it's coming back to, what are your goals? What are your financial goals, and what position do you want to be in? And like, I don't know that that's a common conversation that young people are having in the home or outside of the home. Like, it's, for me, it occurs as a really uncommon conversation to have one 20-year-old ask another 20-year-old, what are your financial goals? What are you working towards?
Jenny, the same applies at all ages.
Right.
It's not just a 20-year-old not having these conversations. We have people who are in their 60s, or I do as clients, who are potentially having unrealistic expectations about the fact that they might want to live in $1 million house, but they've got no money. Well, they do have money to retire on, but if the husband got his way, they would not, because he's got a heart defect, which means he's probably going to die soon. But we have to stop and plan for the fact that his wife is probably going to live till she's 90.
Right.
So it's those conversations that sometimes there's this total disconnect about values, what needs to be achieved, and what expectations are.
So how often, like, if I'm going through my life, how often should I be asking myself, what are my financial goals? Is that something we would do annually? Is that something you do every 5 years? Like, if you're setting up a habit and a mindset and a practice around this, how often would you get people to ask that question?
I do it for myself every 6 months.
Right. Wow.
And it's basically just a simple thing. Measure your net worth.
Yeah.
And the net worth is basically, what do I own that's an investment? What's in my bank account? And what do I owe? And if I have to take money off what I owe and I've got nothing left in my bank accounts, I've got a problem. But if I've actually got a surplus, it's a good starting point.
Okay.
Because a lot of people just never, ever ask the question. Nobody's ever told me that when I first got a mobile phone, for example, that I was entering a credit contract.
Right.
I was just buying the latest mobile phone, because in those days, there was no opportunity to go and buy your own handset.
Yeah.
It was all a case of, here, take your contract with Telstra or whoever your provider was. And you're going to pay that phone off for the next 3 or 4 years. It might die in the meantime, but you're still going to be paying it off.
Yes. And the potential debt ramifications of that. Listen, I want to give our attendees a chance to ask any questions. So if you've got a question for Gail, go ahead and put your name in the chat, and we'll call on you and you can ask your question from there. What I might do while that's happening, Gail, is just talk about that you have a free gift for everyone tonight.
if anyone's at all interested, and this is really helpful for people of all ages and stages of life, it's an opportunity to have a download of our budget template. You can actually take that. It's an Excel spreadsheet, so it's something that's able to be manipulated a little bit if the titles are not exactly right for your personal circumstances. You can grab that, give it to your friends. I do not care. I'm more than happy for this to be shared, because until people understand the flow of money, they're never going to be able to move ahead and actually make some wealth for themselves.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So I've put the free gift in the chat. So if that's something that you want, please feel free to click on that.
Thank you.
And looks like everyone's gone shy on me because I can't see any hands or questions. Nick, if I'm missing anyone, just let me know.
You can click the raise hand button.
Or you can click the raise hand button if you've got that in there.
That's too high tech for me. I just do this.
I can't see everybody on my screen. That's kind of the problem here.
Ah, there you go. There you go. So you've got your answer, Joe and Jordana. Literally, you can just take that budget template, share it with your friends, manipulate it a little bit, but ultimately what it comes down to is start to track what's coming in and start to track and know where it's going out, because that's your initial opportunity for success, creating a surplus.
Doing that. I'm very guilty of spending way too much money on clothes. Way too much money. Mum's laughing right now because she tells me every week.
Okay, so this is a habit that one of my clients who earns $180,000 a year. So this is not just for people who are on low incomes. She never buys anything new other than underwear and shoes. She hits up the op shops, and I tell you what, she has got an amazing wardrobe.
Yeah.
So, the old saying, somebody's trash is somebody else's treasure. And this happens for a person who has a couple of investment properties and a very large superannuation account balance. And she's very happy shopping at the op shops. So consider changing your habits.
I actually heard a story from one of the guys who is in the finance space and had a client who had run out of cash. And what they discovered is that she had a very rich wardrobe and a very big wardrobe, like shoes that she'd never worn in boxes at the back of her cupboard kind of thing. And when they encouraged her to eventually sell some of this stuff, they made $30,000 just from the sale of her clothes, which that blew my mind.
Oh, and the other trick that I use all the time is every 1st of January, I grab the coat hangers in my wardrobe and turn them back to front. And if I haven't worn them in the year, they get donated to the op shop.
Right.
And it means that I don't spend excessive amounts of money on clothing, because I then challenge myself to wear every item in the wardrobe.
Yeah.
So just silly little things. And actually, the best thing is to make it a game for yourself.
Right. Yeah. And seeing how much you can save, how much you can save in terms of your savings account, and save in terms of not spending on things that you don't need, right? Because there's this wonderful saying, you can never get enough of the things that you don't need. And sometimes this compulsion to buy is just fulfilling a need that's, something else really underneath.
It's hiding something else. You're masking something else. Yeah. So dig deeper. Don't dig in your pockets.
I like that. Dig deeper, not in your pockets. That's awesome, Gail. Well, it looks like everybody's a little shy on us tonight. Thank you so much for being on the show and, being the first to sort of kick this off. It's been absolutely wonderful. And I hope that everybody watching has got some value out of tonight. As I said earlier, this is the first of a whole series of different webinars that we'll be doing on all different topics, from personal styling and dating safely online, right through to how to cook on a budget and some more in the money space to kind of help and equip. So if you want to know more about how that is all coming together, make sure you join our Facebook group and tap into the resources that we can put online there. And Gail, if you're happy to, we might actually publish the link for that budget template on there too.
Sure, that's fine. And can I just ask you to make sure you put the link for the Facebook group in your chat so I can grab it?
Great. I'll get Nick to do that for me.
Thank you.
And just before we go, like if anyone watching this now or in the replay is interested to learn more and to get in touch with you, Gail, what's the best way that they can do that?
They can check out my website, which is prosperityplanning.com.au, or they can just email me direct. If they go to the website, there's a booking link on there and you can book an introductory session with no cost.
Yeah.
Or you can email me at Gayle, Gayle, at prosperityplanning.com.au. I would be happy
Nick's
to
just
see.
put that in there.
Oh,
in the
yay,
chat.
go Nick. I'll be happy to help you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, it's been really good. I really loved exploring this topic. As I said, I have a daughter who's 23, and one of the impetus for raising this was sort of having this conversation with her. She's studying law. She loves it. She wants to do that as a career, but she doesn't want to be in a position where she has to work because she's got to pay bills. She wants to be in a position where she can get to choose to go to work. And if the passion dies or something happens, or she just doesn't want to do that anymore, she's got another income stream behind her. And, in terms of a business and investment strategies and what have you, that gives her the freedom to have that choice,
Which is
and
perfect.
yeah. And kudos to her. I wish I had that mentality when I was her age. I can tell you that. So really wonderful. And thank you so much, Gail. Thank you for everybody for joining us today. I hope that you got a lot of value out of this. Book it in your calendar for the last Monday of the month from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. That's when we'll be running monthly sessions, different topics. And by all means, if you know a young woman that would benefit from the types of conversations that we had today and the ones that are coming, please feel free to share the link with them.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, and have a great night, and we'll see you here again in a month's time.